The moment Vanessa Caldwell smirked at my 73-year-old mother across the courtroom, I knew we were witnessing the beginning of her downfall. Your Honor, while I sympathize with Ms. Bennett's age-related confusion, the Evergreen Heights HOA bylaws are quite clear, Vanessa said, emphasizing age-related confusion, with a theatrical pause that made several people in the gallery shift uncomfortably. Her designer suit and perfect blonde bob screamed suburban power, but it was the condescension in her voice that made my blood boil. My mother, Margaret Bennett, sat beside me, back straight, hands folded neatly on the table, her expression betraying nothing. Only the slight tightening around her eyes told me she'd registered the insult. After 22 years on the bench of the state superior court, my mother had developed an unparalleled poker face. A poker face Vanessa Caldwell knew nothing about. I'm Rachel Bennett, 45, an environmental lawyer who moved back to my childhood town of Bellwood after my father passed away last year. Mom had insisted she was fine living alone in the family home, but after she slipped on ice and broke her wrist in February, we agreed that downsizing made sense. The single-story condo in Evergreen Heights seemed perfect, well-maintained grounds, proximity to her friends, and most importantly, no stairs or icy driveways to navigate. What the realtor neglected to mention was that Evergreen Heights had recently experienced a regime change. The once reasonable HOA board had been taken over by Vanessa Caldwell and her slate of candidates who ran on a platform of property value protection and community standards enhancement. Within 3 months of the election, violation notices had increased by 300%, and the previously friendly community had become a battleground of compliance letters and anonymous complaints. Our troubles began with a bird feeder. Mom had always loved watching cardinals in the morning, so I installed a simple cedar feeder outside her kitchen window. 3 days later, a violation notice appeared on her door, unsanctioned exterior fixture installation, reference bylaw 7.3a. Remove within 48 hours or face a $100 fine. When I called the HOA office to explain that the bird feeder was temporary and attached to a removable shepherd's hook not mounted to the building, I was informed that all landscape modifications required prior board approval and was directed to submit a formal application to be reviewed at the next monthly meeting in 6 weeks. This is ridiculous, I told Mom. It's a bird feeder, not a swimming pool. She smiled, that slight, knowing smile I'd seen countless times growing up. Rules are important, Rachel, but so is reasonable application. Let's follow the process. So we did. Mom completed the 4-page application, included a photo and diagram of the feeder's placement, and I hand-delivered it to the HOA office. The secretary, a nervous woman who refused to make eye contact, stamped it received and added it to a precarious stack of identical forms. 2 days later, Vanessa Caldwell herself knocked on Mom's door. Mrs. Bennett, she said, not waiting for an invitation to step inside, I understand you're new to Evergreen Heights, so I wanted to personally welcome you and discuss a few concerns. My mother, ever gracious, invited her in for tea. I sat at the kitchen counter pretending to work while listening to Vanessa deliver what amounted to a kindergarten-level orientation to HOA living. You see, in a community like ours, uniformity is key to maintaining property values, Vanessa explained as if addressing a child, rather than a woman who had once presided over a $200 million class action lawsuit. Your bird feeder application will likely be denied because it creates an inconsistent aesthetic on the eastern-facing units. I see, Mom replied mildly. And which bylaw specifically addresses bird feeders or shepherd's hooks? Vanessa blinked, momentarily thrown. Well, bylaw 7.3a clearly states that exterior modifications. I've read 7.3a, Mom interrupted gently. It refers specifically to permanent fixtures attached to building exteriors. My feeder is freestanding and temporary. Might it fall under landscaping guidelines instead? Vanessa's smile tightened. The board has broad discretion in interpreting the bylaws, Mrs. Bennett. That's why we were elected. Of course, Mom nodded. I'm simply trying to understand the parameters. In my experience, clear communication prevents misunderstandings. Your experience? Vanessa's perfectly arched eyebrows lifted. Were you on an HOA board before? No, Mom replied, taking a sip of tea. Just trying to be a good community member. After Vanessa left, promising to personally review the application, I turned to Mom in disbelief. You didn't tell her you were a judge for over 2 decades. Or that you literally wrote a paper on property law and community governance that's still taught in law schools. Mom smiled. It wasn't relevant to the conversation. Not relevant? She treated you like you were senile. People reveal themselves through their assumptions, Rachel. Mom's eyes twinkled. Sometimes it's useful to let them underestimate you. I should have recognized that look. It was the same one she wore when facing particularly difficult attorneys in her courtroom, the calm before a judicial storm. But even I didn't anticipate how quickly things would escalate, or that we'd end up facing Vanessa Caldwell in an actual courtroom just 3 months later. The bird feeder was just the beginning. Though Mom's application was eventually approved with strict conditions about seat containment and cleaning, it seemed to mark us as targets for Vanessa's particular brand of HOA enforcement. Next came a notice about Mom's welcome mat being non-standard issue. Apparently, only black rectangular mats were permitted, not the colorful welcome friends mat I'd bought her. Then a warning about excessive holiday decoration when Mom placed a small ceramic pumpkin by her door in October. The pumpkin was removed only to be replaced by a violation notice for barren entryway presentation a week later. They're contradicting themselves now, I fumed, pacing Mom's living room. First you can't have decorations, then you have to have decorations. Mom sat calmly in her armchair, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the latest notice. The specific language is interesting. Barren implies neglect rather than minimalism. I wonder if this is a standard form letter or if Vanessa is crafting these personally. Does it matter? It's harassment either way. Intent always matters, Rachel. You know that. Mom set the notice aside. I think Ms. Caldwell is testing boundaries. She's established control over the community and now needs to maintain it through consistent demonstrations of authority. You sound like you're analyzing a hostile witness. Old habits, Mom smiled. Why don't we attend the next board meeting? It might be enlightening. The monthly HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a beige room with uncomfortable folding chairs and fluorescent lighting that hummed just enough to give me a headache. About 20 residents attended, most looking resigned before the meeting even began. Vanessa sat at the center of the board table, flanked by 4 other members who I would soon learn rarely spoke or voted in opposition to her. She ran the meeting with military precision, cutting off questions, dismissing concerns, and repeatedly referring to the bylaws without actually addressing resident-specific issues. When the floor opened for community comments, Mom raised her hand. Vanessa pointedly called on 3 other people first, but eventually acknowledged her with a tight smile. Yes, Mrs. Bennett. Briefly, please. We're running behind schedule. Mom stood, her voice clear and measured. Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. I've been reviewing our community financials as posted on the HOA website, and I have a question about the recent expenditure for landscaping. The approved budget was $45,000, but the actual expenditure was $72,300. Could you explain the variance and whether it was approved by a special board vote? A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Vanessa's smile froze. HOA finances are complex, Mrs. Bennett. The additional expenditure was for emergency services after the spring storms. It was within the board's discretionary spending authority. I see, Mom nodded. And could you direct me to where that discretionary authority is outlined in the bylaws? I've read them thoroughly and found spending limits capped at 10% without membership vote. The room fell silent. One of the board members, a nervous-looking man with thinning hair, shuffled through his papers. We can address specific financial questions after the meeting, Vanessa said firmly. Next comment, please. But the damage was done. Other residents began asking financial questions, and the meeting that was supposed to end at 8 stretched until nearly 10 as Vanessa struggled to maintain control of the increasingly restless crowd. As we walked home in the cool evening air, I nudged Mom's shoulder. That was masterful. You've got everyone questioning the landscaping budget now. It's not just the landscaping, Mom said quietly. Did you notice the new security cameras around the clubhouse? Or the fact that the landscaping company, Green Summit, isn't listed in any local business directories? I hadn't noticed either of those things. Green Summit is owned by Vanessa's brother-in-law, Mom continued. I did some research after receiving their promotional flyer in our welcome packet. The company was formed just 8 months ago, right after Vanessa became HOA president. Are you saying she's funneling HOA money to her family's business? I'm not saying anything definitive yet, but I am curious. The next day, a new violation notice appeared on Mom's door. This one cited community disruption and spreading false information, and referenced a rarely used bylaw that prohibited activities detrimental to community harmony. The fine was $250. This is blatant retaliation, I said, already reaching for my phone to call the HOA office. Don't call angry, Mom advised. Document everything. Let's look more closely at those financial records. Over the next few weeks, Mom methodically built a case as if she were preparing for trial. She requested all HOA financial records for the past 3 years, correlated board meeting minutes with expenditure approvals, and even enlisted her old friend Corolla, retired accountant who also lived in Evergreen Heights, to help analyze the patterns. What they found was troubling. Shortly after Vanessa's board took control, several long-standing service contracts were terminated and replaced with new vendors, all charging significantly higher rates. Green Summit Landscaping was just the most obvious example. There was also a new security company, cleaning service, and pool maintenance contractor, all with mysterious ownership structures and minimal online presence. When Mom tried to discuss these findings at the next HOA meeting, Vanessa cut her microphone and called for an immediate motion to adjourn, which her loyal board members quickly approved. The next day, an official letter arrived by certified mail. The HOA was filing a formal complaint against Margaret Bennett for persistent violation of community standards and deliberate disruption of board proceedings. The letter included a notice of intent to place a lien on her property for accumulated fines totaling $1 for 50, most of which we'd never been previously notified about. This is absurd, I said, already mentally drafting the lawsuit I'd file against the HOA. They can't silence you with fake violations and certainly can't place a lien without due process. Mom read the letter carefully, then set it aside with surprising calm. They're making a mistake. A big one. I'll call Jason at my firm. He specializes in property law. No need to involve your colleagues yet, Mom interrupted. I think I'll handle this personally. Mom, I know you were a judge, but you're retired now. Let me help. She patted my hand. Rachel, dear, I may be retired, but I'm not helpless. Sometimes the most effective rebuke comes from unexpected directions. Her eyes had that familiar spark, the one that had made unprepared attorneys quake in her courtroom. Ms. Caldwell wants to use the legal system as a cudgel. Let's see how well she understands the weapon she's wielding. That afternoon, Mom made several phone calls from her home office, speaking too quietly for me to overhear. When she emerged, she seemed almost energized by the conflict. We have a hearing date, she announced. 2 weeks from Thursday. County Court. Judge Whitaker presiding. Whitaker. I recognized that name. Wasn't he your clerk back in the day? He was indeed one of my brightest. She smiled. Now, I'm going to need my blue suit pressed and my case files from the garage. The banker boxes labeled HOA Precedents 2008-2012. Your father always teased me for keeping those. I think Dad would be enjoying this immensely, I said, already imagining how this would play out. He certainly would. Mom's expression softened at the mention of my father. He always did appreciate a good come-up story. The county courthouse hadn't changed much since I'd visited it as a child, tagging along with Mom on weekends when she needed to catch up on casework. The same imposing columns flanked the entrance, the same faint smell of furniture polish and paper permeated the air, and the same hushed reverence fell over visitors as they passed through the heavy wooden doors.